If you start messing with our veterans, you're not going to continue to recruit a career force if you do not take care of our veterans. And I believe that's where VetUSA is going to be a huge component for the veteran population, not only now, but in the years to come.
Thanks everyone for joining us here on Wellness Wavemakers. This is the second episode in our series, and I'm delighted to tell you I have my new friend here today, Jack Leinweber. He's CEO of VetUSA, which focuses on serving those who have served by helping them with business matters, education, finances, and benefits. There's a lot there. VetUSA is uniquely designed to improve the personal and business lives of active and veteran service members and their families. Their goal is simple: easy to understand information, valuable resources, great products, services, and discounts. Now, I was introduced to Jack in mid-April. It's been a couple of months, hard to believe how time flies. We were both attending a dinner to honor Dr. Sandra Rose Michael in Dallas, the inventor of the energy enhancement system. And she was being acknowledged as the person of the year at the Changing in Life Destiny conference. It featured a lot of the top 100 technologies that are up and coming in the health and wellness world. And Jack was there for a variety of reasons, but I'll let him share. But I was chatting with Sandra about the fact that we had a desire here at Waverider to help veterans. And she said, "You need to meet Jack." And I said, "That sounds great. When we can do it?" And she goes, "Now." And she grabbed my arm and pulled me immediately over to Jack, who was about 2 tables away. And all I know is we chatted for about 90 minutes. And I can't tell you all how I'm delighted to have him here today. So, Jack, I know it's been a couple of months. How are things going?
It's going good down here. We've been real busy with a lot of the compliance and everything. We're real close to finishing up all the negotiations and everything. So we're probably about 4 weeks away. And
That's
so,
awesome.
like I said, we've been real busy on getting all the I's dotted and the T's crossed on this venture we're about to go down the road on.
Well, I know we're going to talk a lot about that, among other things, but I thought it might be helpful for the audience. I got to hear it, but they're all new to this, and you've got a lot of people who follow you. But maybe you can just share, how you came up with the idea for VetUSA back in 2007, and your time in the Air Force, and the business you founded after leaving, and why and what happened. So maybe just give the origin story.
Absolutely. I'm retired Air Force. I was in the Air Force. I was a slow learner, so I spent 21 years in before I got out. But anyway, the last 3 years, I had done a couple national programs before, and we had a problem with a colonel who'd filed a complaint that he was messed up on benefits prior to retirement. And so anyway, I got tasked if I would go create a retirement process. And I'm like, well, I haven't done that before. And they said, well, you've done 2 national programs, so we're sure you can handle this one. So I spent the last 3 years of my career going around the United States and learning everything I could about veteran benefits, whether it was the veteran, the spouse, the children, whatever it was. I learned it, and federal and state benefits, which are entirely different. I'll go into a little bit about that.
Hmm.
But anyway, I spent 3 years. Well, then I briefed a lot of members that were within a year of retiring. And then I myself retired, and I went in the securities industry after that and was doing real well. But anyway, I still was receiving phone calls from colonels and generals wanting me to retire them. And I'm like, I get a call and they say, Jack, we want you to come up here to the Pentagon and retire general. I go, I'm not in the Air Force anymore. And they said, well, no, we'll take it. So anyway, I ended up flying up, retiring them. Well, this continued on for a year. And then I started to decide, I'm like, this is broke a lot worse than what I'd originally thought when I created it while I was in the Air Force, this retirement process. And so I took it and I took it to another level. And I said, well, in the securities industry, I'm going to approach the veterans on that note that they do not know how to transition into the private sector. And again, it was mostly the retirees that I was concentrated on at that time. Well, when I did research after that to go into the private sector, then I started looking at all the veterans, and then it brought in the spouses, and then it brought in the children, and again, then it brought in the businesses. So again, it just kept growing. Well, I created a program, and I brought the broker dealers in, and the meeting lasted 5 minutes, and they shut it down. And I'm like, I thought I was going to jail or something. I thought I did something wrong. Anyway, they said, no, Jack, we're flying you to Chicago. And they flew me to one of the biggest acquisition firms in the world. And they did due diligence on me for 4 days. And once they found out I was the brainchild behind this, they sat me down. I took my father with me, who's a Marine, and we were across the table. And there was 8 CEOs from major firms, and the main guy looked at my father and said, "You know, your son's nothing but a young snot-nosed kid." And my dad about jumped over the table. And anyways, it's like, no, 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 I don't mean that, Bill. And he goes, "What do you mean?" He goes, "You see us CEOs, we're all from major corporations here in the United States." He goes, "Yeah." He goes, "We've all spent 45 years trying to invent what your son has sitting in front of us today. And that's VetUSA." And so from that point on, for the next almost 4 years, they mentored me and on how to expand VetUSA. I mean, from creating a national business model to the valuations to the everything you can imagine on building a major corporation, just like FedEx. And so they start tasking me. Well, then they start bringing other major corporations, and pretty close to about 30 major corporations were involved in the development of VetUSA. And again, it was developed like FedEx. So before we could deliver a product, just like a box from FedEx on an aircraft to a storefront, we had to be able to go nationwide day one, because we knew what would happen with the veterans, because they're a family of groups. So once we help one, all of a sudden we get phone calls from California, Puerto Rico, vets say, "Hey, can you help us?" So we knew what was going to happen. So that's why we stayed on due diligence, and we were on NDAs for so long, is because we knew what was going to happen during what we were about to do. Well, what happened was, when we first started, I was tasked on getting all the benefits for the individual veterans. And that took almost 4 years. And that included the vets on all their benefits, the families, state and federal. And again, federal benefits are different than state, and all the state benefits are different. So if you don't know how to communicate the two, you're not going to give the veteran the information that they're looking for. And the problem is, VA does not talk about state benefits, and state benefits do not talk about federal benefits. So you can see the breakdown for the veterans, because they're getting, well, you don't qualify for this. You don't qualify. Well, they may not for one program, but they do for the other, but they're not being told that. So they leave and thinking they don't have any benefits. Well, again, we did a beta test during this process of over 5,000 vets. And during the beta testing, there wasn't one veteran we didn't help enhance their education, their health, or their financial situation at any time during any of this beta testing process. So we found out real quick how broke the process was. And so then we created the individual. Well, then Secretary Garcia in New Mexico came up to me and he goes, "Jack, y'all are so good with the individual vets and the families. We need help with the veteran-owned businesses." And I'm like, "What are you talking about now?" And he goes, "Well, they get benefits." So we spent another almost 3 to 4 years going to everything we could go to, the national conventions, working with the government agencies to find out what they are. And there is a bunch of benefits for the veterans when they go into business. Service disabled veteran-owned small business, how it works, how they get certified, what the advantages are. And so we went into that program, and we've got that ironed out. So again, now we're experts on the veteran-owned businesses. So then the next part of that was VetUSA. And VetUSA was the component that we wanted to be able to go and have a one place, one-stop shop, we call it, and to where they have a site that's specifically designed for them, their families, and their businesses. And again, so we want them to go into VetUSA 6 to 10 times a day. And again, it's going to be their homepage. So anything to do with their benefits, federal and state, anything to do with the children, anything to do with, like you said, the business side is all there. But also any nonprofits that are veteran driven will be on there. Any government agencies that want to work with the veterans will be on there. So again, there'll be shopping mall. Any companies that want to give discounts to the veterans will be on there. Anything that's going to be advantageous to the veterans will be on VetUSA. So there'll be news on legislative changes. Again, it'll be a one-stop deal, and they won't have to have a PhD to be able to try to figure out how to get through this. Because if you go to the VA site and try to figure something out, you're going to be there for days and you're not going to find out anything. It's so complicated. You know, how do I get my health benefits? How do I get my education benefits? And again, we're just making it to where we cut through the tape and we go straight through. Now, the funny part about this is all the congressional members we met, Senate members, state legislative members, all want this. because after talking to most of them, their biggest phone calls they receive for their staffers are veterans wanting to know what their
Sure.
benefits are. And so they're like, we love VetUSA. So we're getting calls all the time. Jack, when can you be here in California? When can you be? We're like, okay, we're coming. But it's, but that's their biggest call. So they're completely endorsing this. Okay. So, I mean, it's not an issue if they want it. What it is the government is not in the business of transitioning our military members from active duty into the private sector, whether it was World War II, Vietnam, Korea, Gulf War. The situation's the same. They're not in the business. You're no longer an asset. Now, when you're an asset. But the day you walk through that gate, you're no longer an asset to the government. Well, the military members are trained to be in a group formation. The government was going to take care of them. Well, when they get through the gate, they find out that's not the same situation. And just to give you an idea, if I ran a 3-star general through the retirement process that we created. And I met with his staffers and everything because they have staffers do everything for them. Well, I briefed them on what they need to do and everything else. Well, then I retired, let's say an E7, and the E7 would do everything I said before he retired to get everything done. My worst client was a 3-star general because everybody said the generals would get better treatment. He got the worst treatment out of anybody we processed because his staffers knew he was going away, and the day he retired, they wouldn't have to deal with him anymore. So they didn't do anything that they were tasked to do. So he was the absolute worst on getting his benefits put in place after he separated from the military because he was no longer a priority. And so again, it doesn't matter if you're enlisted, officer, senior, junior, if you're just separating or retiring, it doesn't matter. You have benefits. Now, how you apply those benefits and when you go after them is the big question on how you do it. Again, if you do it before, the situation is 90 days. If you do it after, it's 2 years, so that's the breakdown on it. And we get a lot of veterans that are, in their 70s. Hey, Jack, we'd really like to get this. I'm like, don't expect a miracle in the next year. It's probably going to take a year and a half because, again, you're not a priority versus somebody that's in their 30s or 40s that's coming out, retiring or separating. We now have time to work with them to get their benefits put in place. So, and if some situation they do need it down the road, it's already in place. I call it the poker chip in the pocket so that it's in place and you're not trying to reverse engineer on how to get your benefits after the fact. So we want to work with them right out of the gate.
I love it. And I think that the rest of America who maybe aren't in the military or ever spent time in the military, but know people who are challenged or frustrated with getting the benefits they need or getting the information, this is music to my ears. I know it will be to them. It's interesting because I was having a discussion yesterday with a woman who is trying to help bring more awareness to the rights of older people in general. You were mentioning people in their 70s, and there's still a lot of murkiness around what competency means. And so people are getting taken advantage of. And I think that as I was listening to you, I realized that what you're doing is going to safeguard a lot of people and give them and their family members as the veterans age and get to a point where maybe they're not as competent as they once were, but their family will have everything in place to take care of them. I love that. I think that's it's a fantastic service. I think interesting to connect the dots for most people too. Your own personal experience in leaving the military and founding a disabled-owned veteran business itself, and maybe you could just chat a little bit about that because I think there's that connection of how you met Dr. Sandra Rose Michael and just what our discussion about the EE system and all that. But if you would mind, just share with our audience.
Absolutely. Again, I retired. I went through the disability process. And one of the problems we identified right away, and that was even on myself, is when you're in the military, you don't talk about things or injuries that were sustained because you don't want to lose your worldwide duty status. Okay. It's very important. Well, anyway, when you go to retire, then all of a sudden your medical records are reviewed and everything that you had wrong with you is now identified. Well, the problem is when you transition in the private sector, you may not be insurable because you've now identified disabilities that had not been identified prior, and you're going to be stuck in government programs for the rest of your life, where prior to that, you could have been put in a private program that was more competitive and would have handled you and the family much better than a government program. The government programs are a bowl. They throw everybody in a bowl. whether it's Social Security, any of the government program, they do it both. That's all they can do. Well, we take the bull and chop it into 72 pieces, so each of the veterans that come out don't go into, they get identified which one's the best fit. Well, when I came out, I got rated as well, and I was almost rated uninsurable with my disabilities coming out. And so again, it affected me tremendously on what I was rated with. And then I started getting some other ailments down the road from the Gulf War that are now being identified that have had tremendous impact on my life. And again, so going through what I've created, this was part of it. Well, with my health, that EES system became vitally important. Okay, so we were talking about VetUSA being implemented. Well, the last part, I was flown to Chicago, and I guess it was about 10 or 11 years ago, and they introduced me to Dr. Sandra Michael Rowe. And so anyway, we were introduced. They go, Jack, you have everything else in place. We want you to put the wellness. And he goes, because of the problems of the veterans, he said, you know what their problems are. You identify everything about them when they come in the door. So you've already broken down that gate to where they don't like to come through. And again, what I'm saying about that is the veterans are taught not to ask questions during their whole career. And so you had mentioned that the spouse and children and all them wanting to get involved. Well, the reason is when they come see us, like at the conventions or hear about us, they come over and talk to us, the spouse and children. And then they find out it's like their husband or their spouse, whoever served, they're just like, you mean they have benefits? We were told they don't. Well, they drag their husband or their spouse over by their hair. And they go, do you have, and he goes, we work with them about 5 or 10 minutes, and all of a sudden they're finding out they have benefits, educational, health, financial, everything. They're like, what? And so that's how they're coming in. And again, it's that loyalty program. Your veterans are the most loyal market there is in the United States. So whether it's products or services, they are brand loyal. And if you get their trust, and they walk through that door, you have them for the rest of your life. You have to really, really mess up to lose that veteran. And so again, with the EES system, what's great is when they come up to us, we educate them on that front, on their benefits, and then we bring them into the wellness. Well, now you have their trust. Now they're open to the wellness, for the first time. And then the thing that really makes it great is veterans are used to group environments. And when you separate from the military, you're now as an individual, you're isolated for the first time in your life since you've left the military. Well, a lot of the veterans don't make it. They just cannot transition back. You hear about a lot of the homeless ones on meds and that has to do with that transitionary element. What's nice about the ES system, not only can we help them through the benefits, but we get to help them through their health. Okay. And again, we're not charging the veterans for this. So when they see all the advantages they're going to have and what we're going to be able to do, they're sitting there going, this is great. Well, the other part is that we know what the list of concerns are they have. So whether it was World War II, Vietnam, Korea, Gulf War, the ailments are almost identical. What's different is the technology that's identifying those ailments. You know what I mean? And we have so much more technology that what they considered an ailment back then is completely different now. And so again, we know what the list is, like PTSD and other ailments, the Agent Orange, and we know what they are. And so we know how to approach them on, hey, this is what we can do. This is how we can help. But another thing great about the ES system, not only do they get to come in a group environment, but they're also going to see other veterans in there with them for the first time. And so again, it's a way to bring the group. And somebody told me the other day, said, Jack, you're helping the community. Absolutely, we are. It's the first time they're actually going to be able to go get a service, a tangible service that's going to impact them and their families for the rest of their lives. And that's what we're about to do. And we're not charging them a dime. And as long as I'm alive, like I said, we will never charge them a dime for them coming in. But I believe the biggest impact is going to be the spouse and children. And if you look at the veteran population, our target market is 19 million. And that's the vets. And that's just in the U.S. And if you look, then you add the spouse and children, you're blowing past 40 million all day long. And if you start going into Puerto Rico, Virgin Islands, over in Germany and other places where we're going to put ES systems around the world, you're really cranking that number up. And so again, we have a target on how we're going to launch it, but that was the creation of VetUSA. You can see why it took so long to get all of those 5 elements put in place
Absolutely.
before we launched it. So that was the concern. And
Yep.
right now, coming out of the gate, the big concern, we had VetUSA launched, we had it on lockdown, and we opened it up about 3 weeks ago so some people can look at it, but it's going to be locked back down and put on steroids. And so everything we told you is going to happen. We were actually have partners that are going to come in and put this thing on steroids for the veterans. So in the next, let's say 90 days, you'll see her relaunch to be able to do all the capabilities we're talking about right now.
Awesome.
And so again, that's what we're working on, and with those meetings to get everything set. It's already developed. All the resource centers, the wellness centers are already developed. We know what the blueprints look like. We know the products. We have the literature. All the development's done. It's just a matter of implementation and execution.
That's great. Well, it's interesting. You talk about the wellness side of it, and obviously that's why I ended up starting Waverider here in Phoenix, and out of a desire because of our own personal experience with the EE system. And for those of you in the audience listening who aren't familiar with what that stands for, it's the Energy Enhancement System, which you can look up separately, and you can feel free to contact us at Waverider for any information you'd like. But basically, it's a system that allows you to charge your body with the energy that's needed so your body can heal itself. That's in the simplest terms. But it also helps calm your mind down. And I was earlier this week, Jack, on a call with a gentleman who works with a group called the Institute for Healing of Memories. It's an international organization that started out of South Africa. And they conduct meetings and sessions with veterans and people in general from all over the world. It was interesting. He talked a lot about the moral injury that a lot of these folks are still suffering from, especially the Afghan and Iraqi vets, and the sense of guilt that's out there, having seen and so much. And yeah, I know that this can help with the anxiety and just help the telomeres grow in the DNA, a variety of positive results. But to be part of what you're doing, I'm so excited about it. My father was a retired Navy guy himself, passed away with Parkinson's. He was lucky; he had great TRICARE. He had all the corporate kind of insights. But as his son, I was not aware of so much of what he had access to. Now his surviving spouse, my mother, is doing quite well, and I'm sure my story is not unique. I think that even having him passed, still learning about what was available to him and to the family to handle things after his passing. There's just so much out there that people don't know. And I think you articulated it well when we met in Dallas, is that the well-intentioned people at the VA locations, they're just not as maybe educated or aware, can't run the complete reports. They don't have the time to do the in-depth analysis on each individual. And I think that and I don't like knocking them. I think there's a lot of good work happening out there, but they're just overwhelmed. So I was delighted to hear that you're looking to have some mental health counselors at a variety of locations as you roll this out. And maybe you could just share to the extent you're able to at this point, because I don't think that people who are listening to this right now are in the loop as much as I'd like them to be about the number of centers you're planning on rolling out and what your ultimate goals are.
Well, the number of centers that we have on the blueprint, which we have full funding for, is 1,100. And it's actually a lot larger than that. Okay. Once we start really rolling, when you start kicking in the overseas operations, and just to give you an idea, the veteran locations in the United States are actually 1,341. And so if you look at the clinics and everything located throughout, it's much higher than 1,100. The 1,100 was just the major where the major concentration will be coming right out of the gate, but it will expand later on down the road. And again, we have the initial phases set up, how we're going to roll it up. We're going to be real careful with the first 12, and they'll be strategically located within the first 6 months. And the reason for that, we want to make sure they're all operating seamlessly as one. You know what I mean? Where there's no deviation coming out of any one of them. Because again, once that's over, then it goes on steroids. So then it jumps up to 48 and then 89, 180, in the 6 month periods, it just starts accelerating like you wouldn't believe. And so again, we already have that identified, and they will be the 24 unit ES systems, which you can expand on more than I can.
Sure.
Again,
that's what we've got here. Yes. Yeah.
And so, that's the state of the art system that will be going in all these locations. And what's nice about it, what we're looking at is having 5 employees in the ES and 2 employees on the VetUSA. So you'll have 2 benefit advisors inside the wellness center that will be able to help the wellness executives go out and talk to the veterans. So their job is going to be to work the community with the veterans to help the EES system
Outstanding.
service the veterans. So I hope that helps you a little bit on what the approach is going to be. And
Absolutely. Yeah. And I know that you've got a foundation going and there's some websites that you can direct people to learn more. Maybe you could share a little bit more about that because I know I'm excited when you told me about it.
yeah, well, one of the things during the process of this, even in Dallas, when you and I were in Dallas a few
Yeah.
weeks ago, we had several members come up and say, "Hey, Jack, anything we can do with VetUSA? We heard about it. We really like it. We like what y'all are doing for the veterans. Is there any way you can help or donate?" Well, we never intended any donations to come in. It was all self-funded. We're never going to charge them. But then we start thinking about, because we're getting asked so many times, it's like, well, maybe we need to do it. But the one thing we're going to do is 100% of anything that is donated to VetUSA goes back to the vets. None of it goes to VetUSA. And the reason I'm saying that is just to let you know, we minted 5,000 challenge coins and for VetUSA, and we gave it to all the veterans, thanking them for their service. And it was so instrumental. They actually cried. A lot of them saying, "This is the nicest thing." I gave Wayne Newton one, and he came out of a crowd and gave me a hug and said, "This is one of the nicest things I've ever received." And so we're going to continue minting them. But what we're going to do different, instead of just being VetUSA mint, we're going to mint them for the wellness centers. So as your wellness center, you'll have your own challenge coin for the communities where you're at. So it'll be VetUSA on one side, your wellness of your organization on the other side. And then that way you'll also be able to go work with the veterans, with the benefit advisors, and be able to also be able to thank them with the challenge coins. So that's where the funding will go. Will go for the veterans. And again, it was a huge deal, but we set up, so we're actually setting up a site on our Facebook page for the donations, and that'll be up and running probably the next 48 hours. But again, we weren't going to do it. We had no intention of doing it, but we had so many people asking, we started feeling bad. And we had a couple of people say, "Jack, you really need to do it." I'm like, "Well, okay, I guess we'll do challenge coins and just give it all back to the veterans." So that's what we're going to do with the nonprofit. And but again, it's all funded for 10 years, complete ramp up. And that does not include revenues on the other side, which we make on our other products and services, not through the benefit advising, through VetUSA. So that's where it substantiates and continues running for years and years, long after you and I are gone. And so again, that was my intent. And again, the thing that makes it different, if you go way back and you look at Medicare, which used to be a government program, and then it privatized because the government just could not handle that program. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to privatize the transitionary element for the military because they do not do it. They do not want to do it. And we're going to be experts at it. And so again, if you look at the size of the market, it is massive. And again, it's one of the only untouched markets there is in the United States that is not being serviced. And we think it should have been the first market that should have been serviced in the United States.
Agreed.
Our veterans. So
well,
that's
I love the fact. I love the idea of being a disruptive force for good. And I think that that's why we've titled this series Wellness Wavemakers. I think there are people like you that are seeing there is a solution, and you worked diligently from what you told me over many years to get it right, to make it cohesive, and now it's ready to rock and roll. And I just can't wait to be part of it and do whatever we can at the local level. And I hope that this broadcast here in some small way touches some other people that can go to vetusa.com and learn more. And I mean, I've just been through the site more than a few times, and every time I go back, I find something new there that I didn't know was available for folks. So if anybody listening to this has a friend who's a veteran or knows of a family that is confused or curious, you got to go to this site and check it out. And I guess with that, Jack, I don't know if there's anything else you want to comment on about. I mean, we could talk about the state of affairs forever, but is there anything else as a parting comment for folks that you want to share to help them find you, or where they can expect the first couple of centers, if you're able to share that, and anything else you'd like to share?
There'll be the first centers. Some will be in Arizona. Some will be in Texas. That'll probably be your first two. Some in Florida. That will be your first areas. Now, you got to remember, your port states are really your concentration of the vets. So you start hitting California, Florida, Texas, and up north, the Carolinas and that's where the bulk is. When you start getting on the inside of the United States, it ramps down quite a bit. But again, we know where they're at. I can tell you what block
Absolutely.
it is. I can tell you where you're at, where your veterans are, how we need to go get them, what it's going to take to get them, bring them in, and have the loyalty identified as quick as possible. So again, we know how to do that. Already, in fact, all the literature is already done for your stores. So the EF system already has it. So the only thing that's left on development really is the ES system and the VetUSA system, where we brand them together. That will be the last part, which again, that's 30 days worth of product. So that's not a big deal for us. But again, we're ready to roll. We're excited about this. Like I said, it's taken forever. Now you talk about, I've do a lot of work on it. The problem during the development of Patriot, I actually have a book that I'm going to be writing. It's called Power of the Dream, Reality of the Scam. And the reason for that is, you're going to crack up. My mom was in New Orleans or something, and her and her friends went in and saw a psychic or something. They went in somewhere. Well, anyway, this person kept asking my mom, says, "You have a son with an eagle," and she just couldn't figure out what she was talking about. She goes, "Well, I have a son that owns VetUSA," and she goes, "Well, let him know it's going to spread its wings and soar over great waters." Okay,
Holy
this
cow.
was 13 years ago. And so anyway, she comes and tells me, I'm like, "What are you talking about?" So anyway, well, then during the development, we were involved with major corporations, okay, that wanted VetUSA, okay, and for products or whatever. We walked away from 5 major deals because they wanted to be the only product provider. And we said, if you're not the best product for the veterans, we're not going to be delivering your services. And again, I had to walk away from 5 of them and just continue to develop, because it was like, and that included the government. We actually got funding in New Mexico for a resource center. As soon as we got it, then they start saying, we want to put the SBA in there. We want to, and I know it's not happening. I go, they're not doing any services for the veterans. And it's like, I'm going to be able to tell the veterans what they need to hear, not what you want me to tell them to hear. And you know what I'm saying? So I'm not going to have the government be involved in what we're educating our veterans with. And early on, the last part of my career, I was a retention manager. I was in there, the fighters, for the first 15 years. But then the last part, I was in retention. And when I went up and testified and spoke up in Washington, I had told them about retention. I'm like, and if you look at all the elected members, like, how many of y'all served? Less than 3 raised their hand, and the rest of them have never served. And they go, here's the problem. I asked one of them, I said, "You're an attorney, right?" And I go, "Yeah." He goes, "Yeah." And I go, "What was your father?" He was an attorney. "What was your grandfather?" He was an attorney. And I go, "Okay." And I asked one of the military members, I go, "You were in the Army?" "Yes." Did your father serve?" "Yes, he was a Marine." "Did your grandfather serve?" "Yes, he was Army." I go, here's the problem. Military is a chain. We do it because of honor, and that was what we were brought up to do. If you start messing with our veterans and their benefits and what they've earned, I said, this isn't like Vietnam, where you couldn't tell them certain things and the media wasn't out the way it is now. I said, now you hear about it in the media in 24 hours. If there's mistreatment going on or whatever, I go, you're not going to continue to recruit a career force if you do not take care of our veterans. And it has to be nationally known. And so again, this is one of the things I spoke about, is you have to take care of the veterans, because it's their children that are going to continue to serve, unless you bring the draft back in. So that was one of the things I spoke about. And I believe that's where VetUSA is going to be a huge component for the veteran population, not only now, but in the years to come, because we understand the importance of the veterans after they've left the military, and not only while they're in the military. So again, we changed the dynamics. So again, you can see it has applications in the political world, as you were mentioning, as well as the civilian world. So again, we will be very active with the members in that, to make sure the veterans are taken care of legislatively through state and federal organizations.
That's awesome. Well, Jack, thank you for your service yourself, and for the continuing service that you're rendering now. I can't wait to talk more about it. We'll follow it with great interest and continue to let people know. And just know we're another person that's waiting to do whatever we can to help you. And thank you, and God bless. I appreciate it.
And one last thing, you're talking about looking for us. You can go look at LinkedIn on VetUSA. You can go to X for VetUSA. Go to Facebook for VetUSA, and you can also go to YouTube. We have videos on it. If you look up my name, you'll be able to find videos on what VetUSA is actually going to be doing. And so,
Fantastic. And everyone, you can check out the end of this broadcast. You'll have all the websites listed for you. And if you have any questions, you can always contact us here at waveriderscaler.com. Jack, thank you. And I hope you have a great evening, great day, and we'll be in touch.
Hey, thanks a lot, Kurt. You have a great one. All
Take
right,
care.
bye-bye.
Bye-bye.